It was a cold, silent winter morning in the small village of Ravenswood. The snow-covered landscape glistened under the pale sunlight, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine trees. The village church, an ancient stone structure with towering spires, stood at the heart of the town. It was a place of solace, faith, and community for the villagers. But that morning, something extraordinary and unsettling was about to happen. Father Thomas, the village priest, was preparing for the morning mass. He was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He had served the church for over 3 decades, and his faith was as steady as the ancient oak trees that surrounded the village. As he lit the candles on the altar, he heard a faint sound, a soft scratching at the heavy wooden doors of the church. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the sound grew louder, more insistent. Curious, he walked down the aisle and opened the door. What he saw left him frozen in shock. Standing at the entrance was a wolf, a majestic, silver-furred creature with piercing blue eyes. Its fur glistened in the morning light, and its breath formed small clouds in the cold air. But what struck Father Thomas the most was the wolf's demeanor. It didn't seem aggressive or wild. Instead, it looked at him with an almost human-like intensity, as if it had something to communicate. The wolf took a step forward, and Father Thomas instinctively stepped back. But the creature didn't attack. It simply walked past him, its paws making no sound on the stone floor. It moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, and Father Thomas felt an inexplicable urge to follow it. Father Thomas hesitated. He knew he should be cautious, but something deep within him urged him to follow. He grabbed a lantern from the wall and stepped through the door, finding himself in a narrow, winding staircase that led downward. The air grew colder as he descended, and the walls were damp with moisture. The wolf was waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs. It led him through a series of underground tunnels, their walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols that Father Thomas couldn't decipher. The further they went, the more he felt a sense of unease. But he couldn't turn back now. He had to know where the wolf was leading him. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a large, cavernous chamber. The walls were covered in intricate murals depicting scenes of wolves, forests, and ancient rituals. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, and on it lay a small, leather-bound book. The wolf approached the altar and looked back at Father Thomas, as if urging him to take the book. With trembling hands, he picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and symbols. As he began to read, he realized that the book was a diary written by someone who had lived in the village centuries ago. The diary belonged to a young woman named Ilara, who had lived in Ravenswood during a time of great turmoil. The village had been plagued by a series of mysterious disappearances, and the villagers had blamed a pack of wolves that roamed the nearby forests. In their fear and anger, they had hunted the wolves mercilessly, driving them to the brink of extinction. But Ilara had discovered the truth. The disappearances weren't the work of the wolves. They were the result of a dark secret that the village elders had been hiding. The elders had been practicing forbidden rituals, sacrificing innocent people to appease an ancient, malevolent force that dwelled in the forest. The wolves, far from being the villains, had been trying to protect the village from this evil. Ilara had tried to expose the truth, but the elders had silenced her. She had been forced to flee into the forest, where she had lived among the wolves until her dying day. Before she passed away, she had written this diary, hoping that one day someone would find it and uncover the truth. As Father Thomas read the final pages of the diary, tears streamed down his face. He realized that the wolf had led him here to uncover this heartbreaking truth, a truth that had been buried for centuries. The wolf wasn't just an animal. It was a guardian, a protector of the village's forgotten history. Father Thomas closed the diary and looked at the wolf. The creature's eyes seemed to hold a deep sadness, as if it too mourned the loss of Ilara and the innocent lives that had been sacrificed. Without a word, the wolf turned and led him back through the tunnels, up the stairs, and out of the church. As they stepped into the sunlight, the wolf paused and looked at Father Thomas one last time. Then, with a graceful leap, it disappeared into the forest, leaving the priest standing alone in the snow. Father Thomas knew what he had to do. He returned to the church and gathered the villagers for an emergency meeting. He told them everything he had discovered, reading aloud from Ilara's diary and showing them the ancient carvings in the underground chamber. The villagers were shocked and horrified, but they knew that the truth had to be acknowledged. In the days that followed, the village held a memorial for Ilara and the other victims of the elders' dark rituals. They vowed to honor their memory and to protect the wolves that had once been their allies. The church, once a symbol of fear and secrecy, became a place of healing and reconciliation. As for Father Thomas, he never saw the wolf again, but he often felt its presence, especially on cold winter mornings when the air was crisp and the snow glistened in the sunlight. He knew that the wolf was still out there, watching over the village and guarding its secrets. And so, the mysterious wolf in the church became a legend, a reminder of the power of truth, the importance of compassion, and the enduring bond between humans and nature. The wolf led him through the church, past the pews, and toward a small hidden door at the back of the building, a door Father Thomas had never noticed before. The wolf nudged the door open with its snout and disappeared into the darkness beyond. The days following Father Thomas's revelation were filled with a mix of sorrow, reflection, and newfound purpose. The villagers, once united in their fear of the wolves, now stood divided. Some were quick to accept the truth, their hearts heavy with guilt for the centuries of persecution they had inflicted upon the innocent creatures. Others, however, struggled to let go of their deeply ingrained beliefs, clinging to the notion that the wolves were still a threat. Father Thomas, now more determined than ever, took it upon himself to guide the village through this tumultuous time. He spent hours in the church, praying for wisdom and strength. He also began to study Ilara's diary in greater detail, hoping to uncover more about the ancient rituals and the malevolent force that had once plagued Ravenswood. One evening, as he pored over the diary by candlelight, he came across a passage that sent a chill down his spine. Ilara had written about a sacred amulet, a relic said to hold the power to banish the malevolent force forever. According to her, the amulet had been hidden deep within the forest, guarded by the wolves. But the exact location was a mystery, lost to time. Father Thomas knew what he had to do. He had to find the amulet and put an end to the darkness that still lingered in the shadows of Ravenswood. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed the help of someone who knew the forest intimately, someone who could navigate its treacherous terrain. The next morning, Father Thomas sought out a man named Elias, a reclusive hunter who lived on the outskirts of the village. Elias was known for his unparalleled knowledge of the forest and its inhabitants. He had spent his entire life roaming the woods, tracking game and studying the behavior of the wolves. When Father Thomas arrived at Elias's cabin, he found the hunter sharpening his knives by the fire. Elias listened intently as the priest explained everything: the wolf, the diary, the amulet, and the malevolent force. When Father Thomas finished, Elias remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the flames. Finally, he spoke. "I've always known there was something strange about this forest. The wolves. They're not like other animals. They're smarter, more aware. I've seen them do things that defy explanation. If what you're saying is true, then we need to find that amulet, but it won't be easy. The forest is vast and the wolves are wary of humans." Father Thomas nodded. "I understand the risks, but I believe this is what we must do, for the sake of the village and for the wolves." Elias agreed to help, and the two men spent the next few days preparing for their journey. They gathered supplies, studied maps of the forest, and discussed their plan. Father Thomas also took the time to share Ilara's story with the villagers, hoping to inspire them to embrace the truth and support their mission. On the morning of their departure, the village gathered to bid them farewell. Many of the villagers were still skeptical, but there was a newfound sense of hope in the air. Father Thomas and Elias set out at dawn, their breath visible in the cold morning air. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of snow beneath their boots and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As they ventured deeper, the trees grew taller and denser, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air grew colder and the silence became almost oppressive. After hours of walking, they came across a clearing. In the center stood a massive oak tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled with age. At its base was a small stone altar, similar to the one in the underground chamber. Father Thomas felt a surge of hope. They were on the right track. But as they approached the altar, a low growl echoed through the clearing. From the shadows emerged a pack of wolves, their eyes glowing in the dim light. At the forefront was the silver-furred wolf that had led Father Thomas to the diary. It stepped forward, its gaze locked on the priest. Father Thomas held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," he said softly. "We seek the amulet to banish the darkness that once plagued our village. Please, help us." The wolf tilted its head as if considering his words. Then, with a flick of its tail, it turned and began to walk away. The other wolves followed, and Father Thomas and Elias had no choice but to do the same. The wolves led them to a hidden cave, its entrance concealed by a thick curtain of ivy. Inside, the air was damp and cold, and the walls were lined with ancient carvings. At the far end of the cave was a pedestal, and on it rested the amulet, a small, intricately crafted pendant that glowed with a faint, but as Father Thomas reached for the amulet, the silver-furred wolf stepped in front of him, blocking his path. It let out a low growl, its eyes filled with a mixture of warning and sorrow. Elias placed a hand on Father Thomas's shoulder. "It's a test," he whispered. "The wolf wants to know if we're worthy." Father Thomas nodded and knelt before the wolf. "I understand," he said. "You've protected this amulet for centuries, guarding it against those who would misuse its power. But I swear to you, we seek only to bring peace to our village and to honor the bond between humans and wolves." The wolf studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Father Thomas reached out and took the amulet, feeling a surge of warmth as his fingers closed around it. The wolf let out a soft howl, and the other wolves joined in, their voices echoing through the cave. With the amulet in hand, Father Thomas and Elias made their way back to the village, but as they approached the church, they felt a sudden, oppressive darkness descend upon them. The air grew heavy, and the sky turned an unnatural shade of black. From the shadows emerged a figure, a tall, cloaked being with glowing red eyes. It was the malevolent force, the very entity that had once terrorized Ravenswood. It had been awakened by the removal of the amulet, and now it sought to reclaim Father Thomas held up the amulet, its light piercing the darkness. "You have no place here," he declared. "By the power of this amulet, I banish you from this world, never to return." The entity let out a deafening roar, its form writhing and twisting as the light from the amulet engulfed it. With a final, ear-splitting scream, it vanished, leaving behind only a faint, acrid smell. The darkness lifted, and the village was bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. The villagers who had gathered outside the church erupted into cheers. Father Thomas and Elias were hailed as heroes, but the priest knew that the true heroes were the wolves, who had guarded the amulet and guided them to the truth. In the weeks that followed, the village underwent a profound transformation. The villagers, now united in their respect for the wolves, worked together to rebuild their community. They erected a monument in honor of Ilara and the wolves, and the church became a symbol of hope and reconciliation. Father Thomas continued to serve as the village priest, but his sermons now carried a new message, one of unity, compassion, and the enduring bond between humans and nature. He often visited the forest, where he would sit in quiet contemplation, feeling the presence of the silver-furred wolf watching over him. And so, the legend of the mysterious wolf in the church lived on, a reminder of the power of truth, the importance of compassion, and the endearing bond between humans and nature.